All right, so let's go into board policies. So one of the things that, I guess to do is have the policy advisory committee look these over, but I do agree maybe we need to get, I would like to look at this 7.26, the exemption for physical education.
Yeah, so my recommendation for tonight, I would say that maybe we could leave the 200s for the July meeting. I think the easiest one to attack as far as a procedural or actual policy change is really just combining 412 and 420. So if the board could possibly consider taking action to eliminate policy 412 and adopt 420 as edited. I received one set of comments only from a board member on 420, and they would like to eliminate the words both in the short term and long term, and also eliminate representing approximately 4 months of operations. I do not have issue with those two suggestions, and if the other board members do not, we can easily do a vote to delete policy 4:12 and to adopt 4:20 as discussed and amended at tonight's meeting. Mike, you got to share your screen. It's board book page 125, please.
I don't have any issues with those changes either, and I'm in favor of supporting going with the 420 as you've mentioned.
And Mike, if you could make that a little bigger, since it's just on one page, please. So the only changes that were submitted were to strike both in the short and long term. So the policy would, and then the other one was to eliminate the explanation representing approximately 4 months of operating expenses or of operation. If there's no other concerns, Laura's on the advisory council. Gina, any concerns with those suggestions?
No, I don't. No, it looks good.
So if we could maybe get a motion to, Mary Ann, did you provide a motion for the policy changes by each policy, or did you do it as a group?
I thought it was per each policy.
I have. It's for each policy.
All right.
Yes, I have 4 separate ones here.
Okay, so could you read the one, what's the one related to 412 and 420? Does it talk about eliminating 412 and combining?
No, there's one for 220, 223, 412, and 6.
I think the one in 412 has got both things in it.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're right, it does. I'm sorry.
It includes 420.
Yes, 412
Yes.
and 420. Sorry, yes.
So we'll have to say that as per discussed with the amendments, right?
Well, you would say as presented and amended.
Yes.
In the, correct?
Yes,
Right.
as
Yes,
presented,
correct.
discussed, and amended.
Okay. That's the only one that's changing?
I think that's the one we should approve right now.
Okay. All right, I will read the motion. The Board of Education Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby approves updates for policies 4:12, operating fund balances, and policy 4:20, fund balances, as presented and amended in the June 9th, 2020 board agenda packet.
And let the record show that the amendment to 4:12 is to eliminate that policy.
Second. Oh, sorry, Gina.
All right. Second by Ms. Sierra and Marianne.
Ms. Sierra,
Yes.
Ms. Towner,
Yes.
Ms. Salas,
Yes.
Mr. Durkin,
Yes.
Ms. Ruska,
Yes,
Mr. Jacobs,
Yes.
Mr. Smithing.
Yes.
Okay, so the next policy, Mike, if you can go to board book page 126. And I don't believe we'll have enough of a discussion tonight necessarily to approve these. But I think it's important for the board to discuss these before the Curriculum Advisory Council on June 16th. Mike, if you could mute the people in the room so I'm getting feedback again. So the discussion that's come up with the board, one in particular is obviously the state a few years ago with the unfunded mandates had made an emphasis on physical education waivers, which has led to a discussion about our policy with physical education waiver, which is included in 6:310 as well as in 7:260. The one discussion, the only questions that I received tonight for tonight's meeting, right now, our current policy, and this was something that was adjusted a few years back, we only allow varsity athletes that are in grades 11 through 12 to take PE waivers. And the other caveat is that the varsity athletes that take PE waivers are re-enrolled in their PE course at the end of their specific sports season. And so from a scheduling perspective, when a student comes in November to schedule their classes, even if they're a varsity athlete, they are still then being scheduled for a PE class for the next year. And so that, I will use a fall athlete cross country, if at the end of their 9 to 11-week season, then for the remainder of whatever's left of second quarter, they are re-enrolled in their PE class. So that they are able to take a study hall for that during their their athletic season, then they're re-enrolled. So one of the discussions that was presented at a previous meeting from a board member was, well, why wouldn't we just allow them to stay in the study hall for the entire semester? We do have some kids that prefer to take a PE class, some kids don't. So I mean, that's something the board needs to consider if they want to amend the policy that where students' PE waivers could apply for that semester. Historically, a few years back, we made a change, but prior to a few years back, the marching band was allowed to take a PE waiver and be exempt from PE for the entire year. And the board at that time, this was maybe my first or second year on the job here, but the board at that time had concerns with that because then it gave an advantage for both students that were in the marching band to take 2 additional academic classes where athletes had to go back to PE when their season was over. And so the change that was made at that time was if you are in marching band, you can only waive out of the fall semester since that's when the band does march at the football games and does do outside marching and physical activity. So there is some precedent in place that if the board wanted to shift to where the athletes can waive a semester of PE, that can occur. We would need to get some direction from you tonight if that's something you would like the advisory council to work on. The other question that was submitted, as stated previously, was should that be limited to juniors and seniors, or could it go to freshmen and sophomore? All freshmen take PE 9. It's kind of like the introductory to high school PE class. They do a broad curriculum and kind of touch on a few different content areas. And then sophomore year, you have to take the health requirement. So one of the reasons I think it's always been limited to juniors and seniors is because that's where you kind of get into more of the not necessarily elective, but you get the selection process of PE, whether you want to take weightlifting, team sports, mind and body. lifeguarding, those types of PE classes. So I don't know if it's a good idea to be allowing freshmen necessarily to be waiving out of PEs, so that we make sure they do get at least some requirements completed of the state requirement. And then the second sophomore year, they're only taking one semester of PE and one semester of health.
Is health still a state requirement for graduation?
It is. So what we would have to determine if this is something the advisory council could work on if the board would like, what we would have to determine is to figure out, and we could work through this with Ms. Augustine, Ms. Lindquist, we would have to determine like, you know, if when a kid's picking classes in November, how we would account, you know, they can say, hey, I'm going to be a varsity basketball player. Well, if they get cut from the varsity basketball team, the next year, we have to be able to have some room in some of our PE classes so they have a place to go, right? So, because you're kind of scheduling a kid in November or December for the next school year. So we'd have to create some type of administrative procedure so if that student is still not a varsity athlete at that time, they would have to be enrolled in a PE class. And the other, go ahead.
Just a question. Marching band, that fall semester waiver of PE, that does apply to just juniors and seniors or all 4 years?
I am, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that applies to all 4 years. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Why would we do it any different for the kid that plays football?
I could get some background from that for the curriculum advisory if the board wants me to look into that.
I mean, in my opinion, if a kid is on varsity, highly unlikely as a freshman, right? But they're putting in the time and the hours. I hear what you're saying about the other requirements in 9th grade, but I think we're already making an exception for marching band students. Would just think that varsity is I'd like to get Mr. Curtin's opinion on that. If you know, if varsity seems to be the delineator of where we draw the line.
Yes, I could check. I could have him provide some information as well for the advisory council that we can report to the group in July. So I think the bigger thing that we need to discuss is if I just make sure I have this correct. We want to look at, for athletes, just correct me if I'm wrong, athletes, the ability to waive a semester, correct? Not just during their season. That's my first question.
I would say yes, the whole semester.
All right. My second question is if they are multi-sport varsity athletes, are we allowing them to waive both semesters?
Yes. If you're playing 2 varsity sports, I think you don't need to go take PE.
If you're a winter athlete, doesn't your season span 2nd quarter and 3rd quarter, which means it would be 2 semesters? How does that work? Or do you only waive out a 2nd semester because you don't know that you're going to make the team, right?
That is the discussion we will have at the advisory council. My advice to the group would be winter sports would be waived from 2nd semester because the majority of their season is January, February, and half of March. The winter sports season is only like a week or 2 of November and then 2 weeks of December, and we're out of the semester because usually of winter break and exams. But that's something we can finalize as an advisory council. I wanted to get to you know, kind of the expectations or directions from the board. So athletes, if I'm reading this correctly, I just want to make sure I'm taking accurate notes. Athletes can waive for a semester instead of just their season. Multi-sport athletes can waive both semesters. Is that correct?
Yeah, and do we limit it to only varsity, or are we saying all athletes?
I think that was a question. Deanna brought up the point that we allow freshmen to waive a semester of PE, so they have to take at least 1 semester. So the caveat could be that ninth and 10th graders are only allowed to waive one semester, where maybe juniors and seniors can waive two if they're in a varsity sport and marching band or two varsity sports. Does that sound like the compromise the board is supporting?
I mean, because whether you're JV or varsity, you still have the same amount of practice.
Yes, I don't think varsity is the key. I think it was just always to 11th and 12th graders.
Well, I think, yeah. Well, I agree with that. I think we need to move forward with the, advisory council to come back with recommendations.
And that's 9th and 10th grade can waive one semester, whether that's either for band or in athletics.
Right.
That seems reasonable.
So if I'm a sophomore and I'm a varsity athlete, I have to take health. And then I have my PE waiver. If I'm a marching band, I have to take marching band as a sophomore, and I have to take my health. And then as a freshman, it's one semester of either marching band or marching band or a sport, and then a semester of PE. And I will verify what we can and can't do with the board policy and with the state, and we will work on that at the advisory council. The other thing I would like to draw to your attention in 6:310 is on page 128, Mike, if you can go to that, please. And if you could zoom in, please, Mike. So the board or the people watching can see this. So try to go to 100% if you can. 120 maybe. Okay, so yeah, as we begin to review graduation requirements, which is the other directive the board had given the superintendent and Ms. Lindquist a few meetings ago, this is the other section of kind of like our requirements under this policy. And this is some of the changes we've made historically in regards to fine arts survey and some of our additional classes. I don't know if our global area studies is on there, but I just want to make sure the board is aware. I highlighted this in yellow because this is another course that's come up in the past, the performing arts course or the fine arts survey. This may be another course that can be looked at. So as we begin as a curriculum and advisory council to look at the graduation requirements and to see if there's any changes that would either streamline graduation requirements or provide more opportunities for students to have more selection in the classes they want to take, I would advise the advisory council, and just so the board would know, I would probably avoid looking at any type of core classes, but focus more on some of our specific elective requirements we require, and try to eliminate the specificity. There's my slur there, of kind of like giving students specific electives they have to take, and after they get through their their 16 core requirements of math, science, English, social studies, government, etc., that we have some more flexibility in the elective areas. So that's what where we would do our focus on after the PE waiver stuff, is looking at some of our elective requirements. Is there any concerns with that from the board?
I don't see anybody raising their hand here. So I think that gives us a moving forward to look at that.
Okay, so we got the advisory council will work on the PE waivers and graduation requirements, and then we can discuss the 200 at the next board meeting, if the board's okay with that, those two policies.
Sounds like a plan.